Hello, heathens, and welcome to Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your host, Megan Angus. This week, I am, lost to the seas of bullshit. We'll find out. I'm sort of here and I'm sort of not here, but it's fantastic. Everything is fine. And we are going to be looking at we will be tooting and booting the looks from, we are looking at the lunar phases, the astrology, and the holy days of Lughnasadh season, full moon in Aquarius, and this is lunar week 23. Before we get into it, why is this Lughnasadh season if Lughnasadh hasn't happened yet? This is an opinion that I am working on here by declaring that we have entered Lughnasadh season, or Lughnasadh, or Lammas, or other ways of pronouncing that word, or other names for this holiday. In my opinion, once the sun has passed into the sign of Leo in tropical astrology, we're in Lughnasadh season. We're in Lughnasadh season as far as I'm concerned. Other people really feel like that starts August 1st. Full stop. We're not talking about it. No negotiations here. So if you are like, no, man, this is still Litha season, then this is welcome to Litha season, full moon in Aquarius, whatever you need to tell yourself. That's the other thing is we have a full moon in Aquarius in this lunar week, and Aquarius is the sign across from Leo. So again, for me, there's just a lot of Leo emphasis, Leo energy already here. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. If you're new to the podcast, I can go on and on. Queen of the tangents. We're not going to get into it today. Maybe I'll get into it in the Lughnasadh class, which is coming up July 28th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to my YouTube channel, Megan Angus. You can also watch it on my website, www.meganangus.com. Free, completely free in both places. I do take tips. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's get into it. All right. This lunar week starts July 23rd with a full moon at 1 degree of Aquarius. Now, this is our first of two full moons in Aquarius that we get this year. That technically makes the second full moon in Aquarius a blue moon, because it will be the third full moon in a series of 4 full moons in one season, summer. That's one of the definitions of what a blue moon is. We'll get more into that a month from now when we have that next full moon. But on this full moon, first and foremost, let me get into even more lore and folklore. You know, I love the history. I love the science. So we got to talk a little bit about that first before we talk about the astrology or the magical work of this full moon. One of the more traditional names for this full moon is the buck moon, B-U-C-K, as in deer, like antlers. Now, interestingly, herbivores tend to ovulate around full moons, and in particular, per the world's leading expert on deer, the height of the deer rutting season occurs around the 2 or 3 full moons that we have in the heart of summer. And so one of them always falls in the Leo season. It's always going to be the Aquarius full moon opposite the sun in Leo. And so the Leo full moon, aka the Aquarius full moon, is usually called the buck moon. And it's because the deer are out rutting. They're doing their thing at this time of the year, mostly at night, right? Makes sense. It's interesting because to me, the Leo is connected to the fifth house in astrology, and the fifth house is the house of making babies. So, and as we've talked about in the past, doesn't have to be a flesh baby, can be a magical baby, can be an idea baby, can be a process baby, it doesn't have to be a flesh baby, but there is biological rhythm here, biological evidence or patterning, right? That humans, I'm sure, have been observing for some time now. So just some interesting science, some interesting history, folklore stuff for you to connect with this full moon. Now, let's talk about some of the magic and some of the astrology that we're doing with this moon. Okay. Raven Caldera, in their book Moon Phase Astrology, calls this the friendship moon. And we are going to see multiple holy days this week that line up with that. So once again, what a coinkydink, right? But they call this the friendship moon. And in my booklet for Lughnasadh, what I have written here is that we head backstage for the after party. We celebrate our friendships, we make allies, we strengthen bonds, we sign autographs, and we consider the influence and the importance of our friendships and connections to the shared mind. At the full moon, the fruit appears. In our plant metaphor that we've been working with for several months now, at the full moon, the fruit appears. New moon is the seed, and then the seed goes through various stages of struggling to get up out of the soil, to make something of itself, to determine its course and to follow it, to produce something. And now here, the fruit has appeared. And the products are here to be discussed, enjoyed, shared, what have you. And when we are working with any moon in Aquarius, we are having a conversation with ourselves about our connection to our friends and our global village. It's not so much a question of people that we think of as family, and this is where things can get pretty interesting, because for people that have really strong Aquarius placements in their natal chart, friends and family oftentimes are interchangeable. And friends are often treated like family members, and family members or partners sometimes are treated like friends. And for some people, that's really uncomfortable. For some people, especially if there's a lot of like society programming expectation type stuff in there, we can get into this pattern of it's okay if I flake out on my friends. I was on a date with my boyfriend or girlfriend or partner, right? My partner, my lover / my husband or wife or domestic partner is always going to be more important than my friends, right? Duh. Same thing with my family, right? My family relationships are always supposed to take precedence over my friendship relationships. If you tell someone I'm moving across the country to go be with my lover, they're like, oh, wow, that's so passionate. Oh my gosh. Say that same thing but about your friends, right? Like, I'm moving across the country to be with my friends. People are going to be like, are you sure? Because the assumption is those friends have stronger relationships than your friendship, right? And this all steps into and ties into an ongoing conversation that we have about building our family out of our friendships. And how do we relate to people who are blood relatives, who are genetically related to us? Maybe they're the people who raised us if we're not, maybe we were adopted, but they're still our family, right? They still are the people that raised us, but we don't necessarily get along with them. We don't necessarily agree with them. We don't necessarily want that energy or those people in our life. Those are things that 21st century needs to figure out, in my opinion. Like, we really need to come into a place where we can learn to respect people's relationships with each other, regardless of what the nature is of them, whether that is a blood relative, a genetic relative, an adopted relative, a friend, a lover, a partner, an accomplice, an ally, whatever. Like, we need to step into a place of beginning to treat all of these relationships as being equal in a sense. And then, of course, all of that stuff is subject to the individual, right? I know it gets goofy and it gets really weird here. But on the note of mentioning allyship versus accomplices and things like that, let me also say this. I, in my previous versions of these classes, have really emphasized this idea of being a good ally, stepping in and doing what you can, and like standing up for people and all of that stuff. And through my re-education that's ongoing continuously, because I'm always trying to learn and learn better. It's not up to us to determine if we are being good allies. So sometimes this conversation that this full moon can bring up, sometimes it's about how we might be thinking that we're doing something good for a friend, and in fact, we're causing harm. And to create the space to be able to hear that and course correct and continue to value the friendship, etc., etc. It's not up to us to determine if we are a good ally. It's up to the person that we are offering our allyship to determine if we are being a good ally. It's up to us to listen to their critique and get better at that, if, in fact, that is what we are actually trying to offer. And people who are really down, people who are actually down for the shenanigans, those are accomplices. Those are people who I think oftentimes fall into the behaviors that we would normally classify as a relationship that would be like a family member. Like, I would die for this person, or I would put everything on the line for this person, whatever. That's an accomplice. And it's okay if you don't feel like that about your friends. I'm not saying that you have to have this level of intensity in your friendships, but all of this stuff may come up for you in this lunar cycle that we're experiencing this week, because there's other astrology that is supporting this conversation from a couple different directions. And all of this stuff is probably coming up for you, whether it's coming up personally or you're witnessing it in the world. It's probably coming up for you in the world, because this is a big conversation right now. Who has my back? Who has your back? Because the systems that supposedly are here to help us and protect us are clearly here to destroy us, right? So we don't want to put our trust in those systems too much anymore, right? We want to learn how to trust each other, our peers, the people who are in the same place and the same shit that we are in. And there's a lot of social programming that teaches us, no, we can't trust those people because they're not family. We can't trust them because that's not my spouse, right? Again, coming back to the beginning of this part of the conversation of we tend to put our different relationships into these tiers of importance. And if you're family, or if you're a spouse, you're really, really important. And it's okay if I shit on everybody else. And I think that is something that is pushed by the kyriarchy or the patriarchy as a means of keeping us separated from each other. I'm always going to be sliding in a little bit of the revolution type stuff here. So maybe I'm biased in my take on that. I'll accept that. That's fine. But all the same, I'm telling you, this is a great time to go in. This week is a great time to go in and have this conversation with yourself, and really kind of dig in on this material. If you are not feeling any of that, particularly on the full moon itself, because the full moon is on a Friday night, so hey, right? Wherever it's ethical to party, let's fucking go party. Just hanging out with your friends and having a good ass time, that's plenty of magic enough, especially in the world that we live in right now. Being able to insist joy, as I like to say, insist joy into your life. Very, very important. So if you don't want to think about anything heavy, you don't want to do any emotional work for yourself or anybody else, fine with me. I give you permission to crack a beverage, light up something that you enjoy, whatever it is, and, get the juiciest piece of fruit out of the fruit crisper and dig in, enjoy, savor life, have a good laugh with friends. Make sure everybody gets a good hug in if it's safe for you to do so, all of that stuff. Okay, let's look at everything else that's going on with this moon. We have our lunar body work that we are doing, as I say in every podcast. Not a medical doctor, just a doctor of love. So please check in with your trusted health advisor when it comes to anything with your physical body. But under the Aquarius full moon, we are opening, adorning, stimulating the legs, and in particular the lower legs and the calves. Again, regardless of what gender you are, that might be just that you are investing and enjoying some super scrumptious, lovely, hydrating and moisturizing lotion for the skin of your legs. Yum, that's fantastic. Maybe you include some extra stretches. Maybe you leave out some extra stretches. Maybe you wear a piece of clothing that really shows off them gams, baby. Let's see it. Get those turkey legs out in the sun. Let's go. Anything along those lines is appropriate. So, and then with our plant body work that we are doing with the Aquarius moon, we are harvesting, we are doing pest control, we are weeding, and if it makes sense for you, do a little plowing or aerating of the soil of your house plants. And as we've been talking about all through Litha season is probably the most potent time magically for harvesting herbs. We've said that several times. And I would say that this Aquarius moon still counts. Yes, I know I went off on a big old thing at the beginning of the podcast about it's Lughnasadh season and I'm a derp, but I'm still saying I think it's okay to do it. So, and really, even though Litha season is traditionally the height of harvesting season, it is appropriate, if it's appropriate for you to ethically harvest, it's appropriate to harvest all year long. There's just certain times of year where it's really potent, but it can be appropriate to harvest all throughout the year. So harvesting, pest control, all of that stuff. Okay, let's get into everything else that's happening for July 23rd. Okay, on this day we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Altarf, and this is the southern hindfoot of the constellation Cancer. We have a few more stars to get through in the constellation of Cancer in sidereal astrology / astronomy, and this is one of them. Also on this day we have the Greek festival Synoikia. Probably mispronouncing that. Sorry, ancient Greeks. And this is literally a holiday dedicated to bringing houses together. That's the word, literally means houses together. And it was an ancient observance commemorating the unification of Attica. But literally, it was bringing disparate people together and basically telling them, you're going to be friends. Okay? Okay. Also on this day, we have the festival of Ahaukin. This is a Mayan festival dedicated to the god Ahaukin. This god is interesting because of all of the different things that they do and their attitude. It is a bunch of stuff that we already talked about last week, and we are going to talk about over and over again throughout the Lughnasadh season. So here in the Mayan pantheon, in the Mayan myth cycle, we have a deity that sort of is echoing these effects already. They were propitiated to, sacrifices were made to them and prayers were made to this deity before people went into battle or undertook any big venture, because they didn't want defeat, obviously, and they wanted to get the magical information to be able to do what they needed to do in the correct way. This god represented monarchy and nobility. They were a reckless deity, though, and could be directly related to drought, which of course would cause great losses in the harvest. But this deity is also thought of as prophesying the future. What else do they do? They were the inventor of time, space, no big deal, right? Controlled flora and fauna, controlled the climate. And so this god really had their hand in lots of different things and lots of stuff that we're talking about at this time of the year. Interestingly, this god had a different quality because each time he finished fulfilling his cycle, when he left the underworld, he became light, life, and kindness, and a very benevolent deity. But then when he returned from the underworld, like a lot of other vegetation gods, dying, going into the underworld, and then coming back, when he returned from the underworld, he became a jaguar. And also could be depicted as an eagle, also could be depicted as a deer, and could also represent the power and the attitude of a warrior who deserved to be exalted. Lots and lots of stuff that we've already talked about and are going to continue to talk about. Also on this day, we have maybe the Shapatu of Ishtar from our Babylonian ancestors. Now, the reason that I say maybe is because we really, really, really do not have very much in the way of direct dictation from the Babylonians on exact days and times that rituals were held. Many, many people think that festivals and holidays dedicated to Ishtar followed the patterns of the planet Venus, and so they would not have been annular festivals or annual, not annular, sorry. Too much moon and sun stuff. Oh God. Okay. They wouldn't have been annual festivals. They would have been cyclical festivals that happened every 5 to 8 years or something along those lines. Also, a lot of folks recognize how important the moon was in Babylonian times. And it could be that a lot of these festivals that were heavily documented were actually being celebrated every month or every time the moon did a certain thing in a sign. And that would be sort of yearly, but not exactly 365 days in between every festival, right? Okay. So some modern pagan calendars, we've talked about that in previous podcasts. Goddess bless the modern pagan calendars that are out there, even with all of their inaccuracies. They're trying. Some modern pagan calendars put the Shapatu of Ishtar here at the end of July. Sure. Again, we don't know. Could have been something that happened every few years, could have been happen once a year, could have been something that happened every month or every season or following some other cyclical pattern. But we have a whole bunch of holidays coming up in the Lughnasadh season that celebrate badass goddesses and badass women, badass femmes from throughout history. So sure, we can have the Shapatu of Ishtar here too. Why not? That's fine with me. Also on this day, we have the birth of Nephthys. If you listened to last week's podcast, you'll probably remember that we are in the intercalculatory week for ancient Egyptians. That was the time period after their traditional year ended and before their next new traditional year would begin. And during this intercalculatory week are when a lot of the big baller major gods and goddesses of that system are born or produced or arrive on Earth. And so this day marks the birth of Nephthys. Nephthys was a member of the great Ennead of Heliopolis in Egyptian mythology. She's the daughter of Nut and Geb. Nephthys was usually paired with her sister Isis in funerary rites because of their role as protectors of the mummy and the god Osiris, and as the sister wife of Set, who we also talked about quite a bit last week. She was associated with mourning, like M-O-U-R, mourning, the night and darkness, service at specifically temples, childbirth, the dead, protection, magic, health, embalming, and, of course, beer. Nephthys is the Greek form of an epithet that transliterates as roughly Nebet-Hut or Nebet-Het or Nebt-Het from the Egyptian. The origin of the goddess Nephthys is unclear, but the literal translation of her name is usually given as Lady of the House, which in the past, some white male, archaeologists have mistaken for being connected to housewife or something having to do with, the domestic duties or any of that stuff. This is a pervasive error, and it is repeated in lots of places, and it's fucking wrong. She was the Lady of the Temple, or the Lady of the Temple Enclosure, which associates her with the role of a priestess. This title, which may be more of an epithet describing her function than an actual name of hers, probably indicates the association of Nephthys with one particular temple or some specific aspect of Egyptian temple ritual. Along with her sister Isis, Nephthys represented the temple pylon or trapezoidal tower gateway entrance to the temple, which also displayed the flagstaff. And this is really important. We know from throughout a bunch of different systems, goddesses are often associated with gateways and doorways, and they have a very particular role and very particular powers and responsibilities at that place. So pretty cool stuff. She is, as I said, the sister of Isis and the companion of the deity Set. She is a protective goddess who symbolizes the death experience, just as Isis represents the birth experience. And in some of her ancient cosmologies, she is named the helpful goddess or the excellent goddess. And she is also often depicted as the mother of Anubis, who is another god of death, overseeing death and death rituals in Egyptian mythology. With that name, the helpful goddess or the excellent goddess, along with her position as being a deity that helps with death or funerary rites, she very much comes into the Bona Morta, which is the goddess of the good death, or Mary of the good death. Yeah, to me, as soon as I read that was one of her names, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. That's a deity that appears to us in other places, literally as a form of the Virgin Mary. And we know that there is a lot of connection through time between Isis and Mary, a lot of connection. And so here's Nephthys, kind of her twin sister, as literally the good death helper. And yeah, I don't know. That's just really, really cool to me. We're going to talk more about that. We've talked about them, and we're going to talk more about them as the season progresses. Okay, that brings us to July 24th. The moon is still in Aquarius, so we are still doing our Aquarius moon work on this day. Also on this day, Mercury in Cancer trines Neptune retrograde in Pisces at 22 degrees. So if you've got something in Cancer, Mercury is hanging out near that. If you got something in Pisces, Neptune has been hanging out near that and is going to be till the end of fucking time. And they are trining. This is a lovely, sweet, sweet trine, especially for this beautiful, sunny, full moon weekend. We get all of this sun, we get all of this moon, and now we have this very beautiful, sweet trine between Neptune and Mercury in Pisces, Cancer moment. Okay, what does this stimulate for us? Creativity, sensitivity, fantasy adventures, daydreaming. This is a fantastic time to enjoy music, to enjoy romantic poetry, all of that kind of stuff. Researching or studying or just reading about or absorbing mystical work, spiritual work, religious work, all of that very, very appropriate. Doing super hard, detailed work? No, not so much. Making like a definitive plan? No, I wouldn't bother with any of that. Signing a contract? Maybe, but put it off for a day. Mercury transits usually only last about a day unless Mercury is really close to one of its retrograde points and it happens to be moving really slowly. Mercury tends to move really quickly. And so sometimes it's only in transit for a few hours. Like it literally will happen that fast. So this is just a very sweet moment. If there's anything to watch out for, it's that we could be a little too pie in the sky. But probably not. It's probably, as long as we're not trying to get important work done or like make an important decision, the fantasy and the daydreaming is actually really healing and very lovey and wonderful and very like, like we need this moment kind of a thing. The world is on fire and pretty crappy, and I would like to take a mental vacation for a day. Thank you. It's that kind of energy. If it is at all possible for you to go and be in a dreamy place with dreamy people and do dreamy things, I highly recommend it. The only other thing that you might be prepared for, I don't want to say watch out, but be prepared for on this day, is that everybody may be feeling much more empathetic than they usually are, and you may be catching a lot of moods off other people. So just be certain, if as much as you can, what is your mood and what is the mood that maybe you are in. Maybe that's the same thing, but maybe those are different things. And we don't necessarily want to take on the emotional states of other people. We want to share in lovely, fantasy, divine, dreamy moments, but your gig is your gig and my gig is my gig. Okay. What else is happening on this day? Let's talk about it. Starting July 24th and running through the 31st, we have the festival of Guanyin or Kuan Yin all across Southeast Asia. This is one of the largest festivals that happens in Southeast Asia, and it is a really beautiful and amazing blending of goddess worship, Hindu belief and practice, Catholic belief and practice. There's some Buddhism in there. It's just a whole big old mishmash of we're worshiping the goddess, and whatever flag you need to fly to make yourself feel good while the people take care of their business, that's fine. Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, don't care. We're doing the thing. Kuan Yin is a cognate to goddesses like the Virgin Mary. Possibly existed before the Virgin Mary, probably did. She is a multifaceted goddess. She has several different faces, but all of them are geared more or less toward mercy, kindness, nurturing, and protection. As much as Kuan Yin or Guanyin, her name is pronounced both ways, as much as she is a nurturer and she's very kind and she's very loving and supportive and a provider goddess, she also is extremely protective. And very much is a goddess that's like, I will bring the heavens down on your ass if you fuck with my kids. Her kids being the humanity, the people. So this is a week-long festival dedicated to her here in the center of this big season-long, all summer long. We're worshiping all of these oceanic goddesses, all of these mother goddesses in all of these different forms. And here is the Southeast Asian version of that in the Festival of Kuan Yin. Also on this day, from our Hindu friends, we have Guru Purnima. And then from our Buddhist friends, we have Asala Puja. The Guru Purnima is a popular Hindu festival celebrated on this day, and disciples of puja, disciples offer puja or respect or veneration, prayers, devotions to their gurus, their teachers, their magical leaders, as it were, their magical guides. The word guru comes from, it's two Sanskrit words put together, gu and ru, which together means the one who dispels the darkness and takes us toward the light. So any person in your world that is dispensing magical or metaphysical information and guidance for you, this is a great day to just say, hey, thanks. Throw a tip in someone's Venmo. I don't know. I'm just saying. Send them a card, put a post on social media, whatever. This is a fantastic day for that. And then with the Asala Puja, the reason why I mentioned both of these at the same time is because this is a Buddhist festival that occurs on the full moon now, obviously, and it pays homage to Buddha and the commemoration of Buddha's first sermon and the founding of Buddha's Sangha, the Four Noble Truths, which is a pretty important element in Buddhist practice. So on this day, we have a day celebrating a great guru, a great teacher, and then by that measure, celebrating gurus and spiritual teachers and spiritual guides of all kinds. All right, let's move on to July 25th. All right, July 25th, the disseminating moon enters Pisces. Okay, let's briefly talk about our lunar phases. We've just been in the full moon, right? And at the full moon, the seed of the new moon has finally grown into a place where it is producing a piece of fruit. Ta-da! That's what's up at the full moon. Ta-da. Now we have moved into the disseminating moon. This is the first lunar phase after the full moon. And when we look at it, we're like, that's not full anymore. It's starting to turn back into an egg shape, not a full circle. On the disseminating moon, that piece of fruit, our metaphorical piece of fruit, has ripened, right? There's a difference between an apple tree producing an apple, right? Yay, it's an apple, and the apple ripening, right? Like I can eat it when it first is produced, but it's not going to be as tasty as if I wait and let time pass and let the maturity kind of set in a little bit there, right? Okay, so we have moved into the disseminating moon, and this is in Pisces. So our fruit has ripened and it is ready for the harvest. Whatever it is that we have been working on in this particular lunar process over the last 2 weeks or so, we can now, this is now a great time to kind of assess, what did we get out of this process? What has produced? What is my result from this? And we've talked about this a lot in the past, but I'm going to say it again. This doesn't have to be something that you can hold in your hand. This doesn't have to be, oh, I got that raise I was trying to get. The product might be, I was brave enough this time around to ask for the raise when every other time before I would have never even asked. I didn't necessarily get the raise, but I know how to ask for it now. I know how to assert my needs now. That might be the result. So I encourage you to kind of just think back over this last lunar cycle and see, like, what have you worked through? What kind of results? What's your harvest right now? Do not compare your harvest to other people. Don't compare it to what you think success is supposed to look like. Just appraise your progress. Side note, all progress is forward progress. So even if it feels like you went backwards, maybe you could have gone worse, you know? Maybe it could have been worse. Okay. On our disseminating moon in Pisces, what are we dealing with? Well, during the waxing phases, I should say, of Pisces moons, we are dealing with one fish in the Pisces sign, right? On the waning moons, we're dealing with the other fish. So on the waxing moons that we move through with Pisces, we can sometimes be really encouraged to have these big, fantastic ideas about things and how big stuff can get. We can overexert ourselves. We can overextend ourselves, especially when it comes to daydreaming and things that induce dreamy states for us, like sleeping all the time or doing drugs when that's not necessarily healthy for us. No judgment on doing drugs, just saying, if that's healthy for you or not. And the waxing Pisces moons can kind of be like, it'll be fine, and really encourage us to step into those behaviors. On the waning Pisces moon, we're kind of going in the opposite direction. And now it's about how much can we give? How much can we serve? How much can we offer? How much can we martyr ourselves to a thing? And so we're sort of losing ourselves in the other way, right? Waxing moons, we're losing ourselves through delirium, and now I'm losing myself through losing my literal sense of self. So on this moon in particular, a lot of the work that we are doing is around giving to the point of martyrdom and how that actually doesn't serve anybody. That doesn't actually help the situation. It's calling ourselves out when we are helping people so that we feel needed. When we are helping people so that we can cast ourselves as the good guy in our own mental TV show. When we are helping other people to feel superior about ourselves. When we are helping other people to feel pride about how much we have sacrificed ourselves to make sure that this thing happened. Oh my God. So the big conversation here is, how can I give selflessly, but also cleanly, with no special emotional attachments? That's tough work. I know that this is funky stuff. You know me, I'm always bringing up the funky stuff. That's my job. So on this moon, it's like, yeah, the systems need support. People need to dive in. We all need to be about the thing, right? We started off with this conversation on, who am I connected to? Who do I really think of as friend? Who do I think of as family? And how do I treat those people based on who I think of as friend and family? And now we're getting into the work of, and what do I do for those people? And when am I going too far with that? And when am I, quote unquote, helping people when it's actually about trying to satisfy something within myself? That stuff. That's what's up with this moon. I know it's funky stuff, because we still need to be out there helping our people, is the thing. And while we're doing it, we still need to be checking our motivations. Coming back to our conversation at the beginning of the podcast about allyship versus accomplices and all of that, we need to be checking our motivations on why we need to be involved with this group and help them and all of that stuff, beyond they need help and I have the skills or the parts to help them. That stuff. Okay. With our lunar body, now that the moon is in the waning phases, we are reducing, relieving, soothing, and resting or relaxing our feet in particular. Get somebody to give you a good foot rub, and then you can switch off and give them a good foot rub. So that way nobody is the martyr and nobody is getting all of the goods, right? Everybody gets to be the star. Everybody gets to be the handmaiden to the star. And with our plant bodies, we are planting, transplanting, and grafting, if trees are something that you get to work with, for below ground efforts. With plants in particular, where we really want to support the root growth and root health. That's what's up. Okay. Also on this day, we have Mercury in Cancer oppose Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 25 degrees. So, with all of that stuff that I just talked about being a friend and helping people, but what are your actual motivations on getting in and helping people and being a part of things? When Mercury is opposing Pluto, this can be a fantastic time to get to the bottom of a subject, especially where it is concerning you and other people. But that can digress into intellectual battle of wills, and it can also digress into manipulating people through information, manipulating people through propaganda, hiding info, doing compulsive research on things, and all of that stuff. So, here we have this conversation on, why are you helping people? And Mercury opposed Pluto might be like, well, let me spin a fucking yarn about, why I'm here and what I know and how I can help and all of that stuff. But the thing is, and I've said this in the past, I'll say it again. Anytime we're having a square to Pluto, but especially an opposition to Pluto, Pluto can really help pull up a lot of the stuff in us that is compulsive, that's obsessive, that is sort of hidden in the underground of us and kind of working from behind the scenes. And we will move from a place that feels like it's happening on a gut level, that feels like it's happening on an intuitive level, but actually it's coming from this very subterranean, murky, spooky place that Pluto is hanging out in. So how is that not so great? Like I said, when we're using that to manipulate people, when we are, involved in propaganda, whether we're eating the propaganda or we're dispensing it, where we're hiding information from people to make a situation appear a certain way. Where is this really fantastic? Doing therapy work, talking with a person who can go down into the depths with you. That's great, right? So we have sort of an inclination on this day of like, I think I want to get into some spooky shit. And your therapist is like, finally, let's go. But if we're not present with ourself, and I say that a lot, but it's really the truth. If we're not present with ourself, then Pluto may kind of take over the show, or our Plutonian elements that are in all of us may kind of take over the show. And all of a sudden we're saying and doing stuff that's like, oh man, this is fully going to bite me in the ass at some point in the future. And that's really what I wanted to say ultimately about this kind of stuff when it comes to Pluto oppositions. If we're not present with ourselves, we're going to do stuff that fully will come back to us later. So if just being an ethical person isn't enough of a motivation for you, no judgment. I don't know where you are on your journey. Let me also give some fear to you to behave correctly. This shit will come back to bite you in the ass. Don't do it. Don't spin that out into the universe for it to come reeling back on you. All right, briefly, let's talk about the holy days of July 25th. Okay, holy days for July 25th. We have a few. There's one that I'm really going to spend time talking about. So we have from Belgium, the Procession of the Witches, which may happen every year, probably was stopped for COVID. This is a modern festival celebrating witches and witchcraft as a lifestyle and more as an aesthetic than it is actual like celebration of Wicca or paganism, but also paganism as a cultural element. It celebrates paganism as a cultural element more than it does a religious practice. But all the same, it's a very cute, it's a really awesome festival. Lots of witches, lots of trolls, lots of people in really great costumes parading up and down the streets. Really cute stuff. Also on this day, we have the Feast of St. James and the Feast of St. Christopher from our Catholic friends. Not too much interesting stuff to say about these guys, except that St. James is connected to the scallop, is connected to equestrians and furrers and tanners and pharmacists. And St. Christopher, who you may or may not have heard of, is a saint that has a little bit of shade on him because at some point he was considered a saint, but he has been officially de-sainted, decanonized, de-beatified, whatever the term is. I don't know, shafted, whatever. But St. Christopher is most famous for carrying Christ across a river and keeping them safe as they crossed this river. We are going to talk about river deities multiple times in the season of Lughnasadh. So very interesting that here at the start of Lughnasadh, we have a feast day to St. Christopher who carried Christ across a river specifically. But what I also think is very important about St. Christopher is that St. Christopher was beheaded. And that is going to come into play over and over again throughout Lughnasadh season. The beheading of holy deities is a big deal. We'll talk more about it in class. Also on this day, sacrifices to the deities of honor and victory from our Roman ancestors. We've talked about honor and victory before this year. That's Virtus and Onos. But basically they were just like venerated for being honorable and victorious, pretty much. The goddess is sort of equated to Nike. She's also related to Bellona. She was adapted from a Sabine agricultural goddess Vacuna and was often seen riding in a chariot. And that is also an important note because we know that throughout Cancer season, we have lots and lots of deities hanging out in chariots. The sun is often depicted hanging out in a chariot. Okay, the big holiday, it's not that big, but the one I really want to focus on, and we will also talk more about this in class, is Domnach Crom Dub from Ireland, or our Irish pagan friends. This is a holiday celebrating the deity Crom Dub. That person's name means dark crooked one, or broken one, or dark bent one. This is a deity that is a version of another deity named Crom Cruach. And this character is very much like the dark twin to the light version of this deity, Crom Cruach. Crom's name comes from several different things, but means things like bent or crooked or stooped. And Ken, Cenn, means head, and by that extension, head or chief, like the head person in charge. And Kruak, or Kruak, is a noun meaning a pile or a heap or a mound or a stack, generally of grain or hay or peat or some other gathered goody or booty or something along those lines, including slaughtered fighters. So a pile of slaughtered fighters was also a Kruak. A common extension is its reference to hills or mountains that look like stacks or piles. So we have a deity that has a light half and a dark half, and the dark half is being venerated here, but their names ultimately relate to piles of grain, piles of hay, which is what happens when you harvest them. Interesting stuff here. Crom Cruach, Crom Dub, was supposedly beaten by St. Patrick. Of course, that is an archetype that comes to us at the start of spring. And so this is a deity that is here at the height of summer, but relates to the harvest festival that is going to run through fall. We, like I said, are going to talk more about this character, but there's just really cool stuff connected to Crom Cruach and Crom Dub in particular, Domnach Crom Dub. There may have been a bull sacrifice at this time. And that's something that will come into play as well over the next month and a half. Yeah, cool stuff. There is a poem from the 12th century referencing a sacrifice in exchange for milk and grain, suggesting that Crom had a function as a fertility god. So I really see this as a character that, has a light half, has a dark half, has connection to the vegetation and the land, and has to go through their ceremonial sacrificial death and rebirth, like all of our vegetation deities at this time of year. So this is the Irish version of that. The description of his image as a gold figure surrounded by 12 stone or bronze figures has been interpreted by some as representing the sun surrounded by the signs of the zodiac, suggesting also a function as a solar deity. One of my favorite pieces of detail about Crom Dub. Wow, you know what? No, I'm going to save that for the class. All right, let's move on to July 26th. All right, July 26th, we still have our disseminating moon in Pisces, so we are still doing that work. And other than that, we have just a few holy days for today. We have the feasts of Saint Anne and Saint Joachim from our Catholic friends. Saint Anne, according to apocryphal Christian tradition as well as Islamic tradition, was the maternal mother, the actual mother of Mary, and the maternal grandmother of Jesus. And, that's kind of interesting, right? Also, I think what's very interesting is that one of her symbols is the door or a doorway. Pretty sure we just talked about that with Nephthys a couple days ago. Interesting. All right, moving on to what is also happening on this same day, the Feast of Gran Izuli. Irzuli is a beautiful goddess that is worshipped in a variety of the Yoruba land diaspora traditions under the name Gran Irzuli. This is her face in the Vodun tradition. And Gran Irzuli, aka Grandma Irzuli, represents the wisdom granted by experience and maturity and grandmotherly kindness and love. She is, if it isn't obvious, syncretized with Saint Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary. So we want to see that these holidays are happening on the same day. That makes perfect sense to us. Also on this day, we have in the modern pagan calendar from our Norse friends, a festival dedicated to the entity Sleipnir. And this might be an ancient Norse holiday as well, but it's not well documented. This festival celebrates Odin's 8-legged steed, Sleipnir. Sleipnir is a shamanic horse and is used to travel between states of consciousness. AKA, Sleipnir would have represented the literal tools that Odin, the shaman, would ride, quote unquote, as they traveled from this world to the other worlds to do their magical work and bring that information back again. The name Sleipnir means smooth or gliding and is the source of the modern English word slippery. Some scholars have suggested that Sleipnir had 8 legs as a symbol of the 8 legs of 4 men carrying a coffin, becoming a steed to carry the rider into the underworld. That's cool. We don't know if that's true, but it might be. A stainless steel statue of Sleipnir appears in the town of Wednesbury in the United Kingdom. And of course, Wednesbury means Woden's Hill. Woden is the Anglo-Saxon name for Odin. And if Wednesbury sounds familiar, like maybe the day Wednesday, yes, in fact, Wednesday is Woden's day. Wednesday is named for the god Woden, aka Odin. Moving on. All right, July 27th. We still have our disseminating moon in Pisces. It is actually at the disseminating degree on this day at 19 degrees of Pisces, but we are still continuing the work that we've been doing for the last 2 days. Also on this day, Mercury enters Leo. Okay. So what does that do? My word or my phrase for Mercury in Leo is sophisticated leadership. We have leadership from our Leo vibes. And what happens when Mercury enters the scene is we're now able to express ourselves with more authority. And so that is our speech, our mannerisms, the way that we communicate, the things that we say, how we think about things from a more leadership-oriented / performance-oriented state or place or vision. Our speech and our thinking also becomes much more passionate, has a lot more flair and a lot more charisma and charm to it than usual. And so that's the Leo influence on our Mercury bodies, our Mercury portions of ourselves. We may feel a lot more conviction about a thing than we normally do. This also can be us taking ourselves a little more seriously, up to a little too seriously while Mercury is traveling through Leo, but also the whole of this season of summer, and in particular of Lughnasadh, is a little bit about taking ourselves a bit more seriously, isn't it? And stepping into leadership roles, stepping into prominence roles, performance roles, and saying, I've got this, and snatching the mic and giving it to the kids, basically, right? Yeah. So do we want to be an asshole about it? I mean... your mileage may vary, but you call the shots here. When Mercury is in Leo, I think it is about letting our hair down, letting the ribbons fly in the wind a little bit, and being a little more grandiose in how we express ourselves, and being open as well to more grandiose ideas and information, and taking in information about the impact that we are having on other people and the roles that maybe they are putting us in or seeing us in, especially if those are leadership roles, mentor roles, that type of thing. Just being aware of that, utilizing it, stepping into it, embracing it, accepting it, grasping it. All right, let's talk about the holy days of July 27th. Okay, on July 27th through the 29th, we have Lucaria from our Roman ancestors. This was a festival of the Grove. We don't have a lot of information about it, but we do know that it was connected to 2 other holiday cycles that are happening at this time of year. So this might have been a festival around grove clearing. This might have been dedicated to a particular deity. It might have been drought related, but we do know that it is connected with the Neptunalia on the 23rd of July and the Furinalia, which happened on the 25th of July. And these festivals, these 3 festivals together, kind of deal with the idea of the natural world as this sort of untamed power. whether that's the power of nature in the woods or the power of the waters, like in oceans or in rivers, or the power of underground waters coming from springs and from wells. It was sort of all three of these were sort of like, witnessing the power of these untamed resources and their fickleness too. And the danger there of like not being in control of those systems, basically. And so, in contrast to that, the next three festivals that come through, which is Consualia, Vulcanalia, and Opiconcevia. Those three festivals really celebrate like the dominion of humans over the natural world. So we have these three festivals that are like, wow, the world is really wild. And then there's another festival cycle that comes in another month or so that's like, and look at how we have tamed it. The Romans, Okay. Also happening on this day, way cooler. Let's talk about this a lot. This is Hatshepsut's Day from our Egyptian ancestors. I could go on forever about the badass bitch that was Hatshepsut. She's a badass bitch. Hatshepsut, come on. Ugh. I live for this woman, honestly. I wish I could go back in time and meet her because damn, she had to be a badass. Come on. Okay. She held the title of foremost of noble ladies. She is the second historically confirmed female pharaoh. She wore a beard. And for the populace of Egypt, they were like, well, she's got the beard on. That means she's in charge. And I love that because it's like whether I grew this naturally or I strapped it on, the effect is the same, baby. Why do I love her so much? One, because she basically told everybody to fuck off. She was the daughter of a king. And so by that, she has royal blood in her. By the worldview of ancient Egyptians at the time, pharaohs were descended from the gods. If she is the daughter of a pharaoh, she too is the descendant of the gods. So good enough. I've got the juju. I've got the power, right? She was smart. She was empathetic. She was an incredible leader to the Egyptian people. By some sources, she is thought of as not the most powerful woman in human history, but possibly the most powerful person in recorded human history because of the size of the queendom that she ruled over and nurtured. She brought Egypt up to one of its great heights in the thousands of years that the Egyptian civilization, as far as the ancient Egyptian civilization existed, she really marked one of the high points of this civilization. She founded the great epicenter of the Valley of the Kings. That was her idea, and she began the building there, where dozens of pharaohs and pharaohs' families were entombed for thousands of years afterwards. She started that. She founded that. She was really thought of as a founder of cities. She built these massive, massive complexes with perfect geometry and perfect balance and symmetry thousands of years before the Greeks were ever thinking about doing stuff like that. She just was absolutely amazing. And then, once she died, the next pharaoh to take over, which I believe was Amenhotep, just did everything in his power to literally erase her from history, which is that's a move, that's a thing, that's a decision, that's a choice that you could make. In the Egyptian worldview, you carry your name into the afterlife. And if your name is obliterated here in the physical world, you lose your name in the afterlife and you are anonymous. You don't know who you are, and no one knows who you are. You can't be identified. So for this ruler to for anybody to come along afterwards and destroy the name of someone after they had died was sort of this very damning thing, to like basically try to remove them from history, to remove them from the memory, the collective memory. Yeah. So let's not talk about that part. Let's just focus on the fact that she was a badass hot shep soot. Oh my God, a badass hot shep soot. Okay. Egyptologists regard her as I said, one of the most successful pharaohs. She potentially is the pharaoh that brought myrrh to Egypt. Like, that's what we're talking about. And, that's the level of influence that this person had on the course of this civilization. She reigned longer than any other woman of an indigenous Egyptian dynasty. And according to Egyptologist James Henry Breasted, I was like, that's his last name and he's working on her? Okay, I'm in. She's also known as, quote, the first great woman in history of whom we are informed. Hatshepsut, she's a badass. Check her out. Check her out. Her Wikipedia page is miles long. There's tons of books about her. Actually, there's not enough literature in my opinion, about her, but she's really, really cool. And her day is July 27th. Okay, let's move on to the rest of the week. Okay, July 28th, we have our disseminating moon entering Aries. I really think of this moon as kind of a remedy to that stuff that we have been working through with our disseminating Pisces moon, of kind of calling ourselves out on our martyrdom behaviors. The remedy to this work, I think, and we need to do the work, so I don't want to say that the work is bad. We need to do that work, but to kind of pull us out of it into something that's actually productive, here comes this disseminating moon in Aries. So we team up with others to fight for a mutual goal. Right? We get out of this very myopic, what am I doing and why am I doing it place, into what does the group need? Let me throw in and add to the fight. We might not be in alignment with these folks in any other way, but they agree with the goal. And I think that that's also really important to help get us out of our heads and out of our hearts a little bit and back into, but the work still has to get done, right? So learning how to take the lead and drive and be special and stand out and detach that from our ego. It's about the team and the goal, not getting credit for our special part, but still taking pride in our part that we are in charge of. This is work that leaders have to do. They have to figure out a way to remove themselves emotionally from the situation and still see the thing through, still be invested as if it was their own project, but it's a project for the group, but they're still going to lead it. They're still going to be in charge. They're still doing, they're still leading. They're still passionate about it, but it's not about any one person getting the credit. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about this thing has to get done. We're all on the same page. Let's get it done. Okay. For our lunar body, we are reducing, relieving, resting, soothing, or relaxing the scalp, the face, the hair, and sinuses. Those are all ruled by Aries. And for our plant body work, we are harvesting, we are controlling pests, we are weeding, we are plowing, and we are pruning, especially when we are concerned with below ground growth for this plant. Also on this day, Jupiter in retrograde enters backwards into Aquarius, the last few degrees of Aquarius. And so we are going back over our internal conversations around freedom, independence, and also our connections to our communities and the global village. So this is very much tying into our work that we're doing with the full moon in Aquarius, obviously. And it's very much tying into the work that we're doing in this week, as well as throughout this season, around what is my connection to community? How do I feel about these people? How do I act on those feelings? And where should I really be putting my efforts and my tools and my skills? Who is going to be best benefited from that? So allow this Jupiter retrograde moment as it's continuing. It's been in retrograde for a while. This has been happening for a minute. It's been traveling through Pisces. It's now entering Aquarius again, backwards. So just allow it to also bring its information and its teachings to you within this whole subject, right? Here's what I will say is where this can get rough is that we can be a little tough when it comes to compromising things. And Jupiter sometimes wants to bring in too much information, too many disparate opinions And sometimes we have to go, totally, I love that you're thinking. Let's just get this fucking thing done. Okay? Okay. I love you so much, but shut up and please work with me on this. And then we can talk all about it later. All right. Also on this day. All right. On this day, we have the feast of the Archangel Uriel or Uriel. This is a character that is venerated, worshipped, and worked with from so many different angles in so many different magical and spiritual traditions. Lots of the Abrahamic faith folks mess with the archangels, but lots of magical people and pagans and magicians and witches do as well. Uriel is the archangel of earth. They carry fire in their palm. They also carry a book, a scroll, a flaming sword, a disc of the sun, appropriate for this time of year, and a celestial orb or disc of stars and constellations. So this is also, a teaching of the seasons and a teaching of the wheel of the cycle of the sky, yada, yada, yada. Interesting that Uriel has this, and we also had, as we talked about a couple days ago, Crom Dub being depicted as this center golden element with 12 entities around them. In Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, they're also depicted holding a chalice. They are the patron of arts, confirmation, sciences, poetry, judgment, etc., etc. Also, and I could go on, but I'm not going to on the archangels. Perhaps I'll teach a whole class on just them because they're potent to work with. But yeah, okay. Also on this day, we have Pythia's birthday. This is definitely something from the modern pagan era, but hearkening back to a festival that may or may not have existed in ancient times. But it is in recognition of a person who also was a position at a temple. So Pythia, or the Pythia, was the high priestess of the temple of Apollo at Delphi, who also served as its oracle, also known as the Oracle of Delphi. The name Pythia is derived from Pytho, which in myth was the original name of Delphi. Etymologically, the Greeks derived this place from the place name, from this verb puthine or puthine, to rot, which refers to the sickly sweet smell of decomposition of the body of the monstrous Python after she was slain by Apollo. This is the same myth of Namu or Tiamat being slain by Marduk. Pythia was widely credited for her prophecies uttered under divine possession by Apollo. The Pythian priestess emerged preeminent by the end of the 7th century BC and continued to be consulted until the late 4th century AD or CE, when the practice was ended by Christianity. Pythia may have been the name of an individual, but was most likely the title of whoever the high priestess was that was serving at the Oracle of Delphi, as the Oracle of Delphi at the Temple of Delphi. The gases, there's still gases that come up from the site where the temple is, and it's figured that the gases were probably significantly stronger back in the day. They have a sickly sweet smell. I can't remember what the natural gas is that's coming up. It's not gas, it's something else. It's some kind of vapor. But has a sickly sweet smell, was definitely stronger back in the day, and absolutely will induce hallucinations, visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, and people can still talk and communicate, but they communicate using words in a really weird way, in a very different way. So we have the geological and the scientific evidence to show that, yes, this temple probably really did there were places within this temple that really did induce altered states in people, and then these priestesses were dispensing the information from that point. Anyways, this is a day for that. Also on this day, July 28th, is the Lughnasadh class. 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. See you on YouTube. All right, let's move on to July 29th. All right, July 29th, we still have our disseminating moon in Aries, so we are still doing that work in the background. And also on this day, we have Venus in Virgo square the North Node at in Gemini at 8 degrees. This transit, Venus squaring the North Node, can tempt us into ignoring our higher purpose in favor of immediate ease and pleasure. And, I can't blame you, honestly. Like, it's crappy out there, people. And, we need some fun. We need to have some joy. I'm going to say it over and over again. But also, right? We don't want to eschew where we know we should be headed, and the work that we know that we're supposed to be doing, just to have things be nice for the next 5 minutes, right? That's screwing over future us. And we don't want to do that. We want to set future us up for as much success as is possible in all of this wacky stuff that's going on. So this is a day where we might be tempted to ignore our higher purpose in favor of immediate ease and pleasure. Also really important given all of this leadership blah, blah, blah that we're going on about, right? Opening your heart and accepting guidance and love from others instead of trying to go it alone, very, very potent. Going it alone will not turn out the way that you hope it will. And that might manifest for you as, are others blocking me? Are they stopping me? Are they trying to stop me from getting where I want to be? Or am I expecting and projecting too much onto these people? Either way, some old resentments might come up to the surface regardless. So speak what you need truthfully and listen to what people can honestly give you, and that will illuminate the pathway through this moment. Really important work. What do I need, and who can actually give that to me? Might be no one around me. I might need to give it to myself. I might need to find someone else. Slash, are people trying to help me? And me saying no to that reaffirms a reality for myself that is actually cutting myself off from where I'm really supposed to be going. Heavy stuff, man. It's all here. Also on this day, we have Mars in Leo oppose Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius at 29 degrees. So this transit can kind of be whittled down to foolish or lucky. We may see a culmination in our efforts around attempts to expand our empire or expand our domain, expand our thing that we're trying to build in the world. But the real question or the real work in this is, can you work through the fire and the drive and the ambition of Mars towards enlightened self-interests, but not be selfish, right? Get the difference there. It's very much what we were talking about just a couple days ago with the lunar work and other stuff. It's like, where is it that I'm supposed to step up and take pride in what I'm doing? And where is it that I need to, just put my product out and let people be stoked on it, but not really internalize that thing. We can come across as domineering and all of that stuff if we are trying to present ourselves as larger than life, or if we're trying to present ourselves as something that we are not. And what's really fun is it's very likely that somebody else is going to be like, well, I'll play Mars here, and they'll totally call you out on it. So Jupiter's like, I'll just exaggerate my way through this. And Mars is like, I don't know if that's a good idea. So really this is about becoming, as big and as bold as you naturally are. That's what it looks like if we move through this transit and we are present with ourselves, which of course we love in Leo season, right? We want that. Also, randomly for this transit, your timing might be really incredible, oddly enough. But yeah, this is about not being full of ourselves and exaggerating to ourselves and to other people. I can totally do that. I know about that. I've been there. I've seen that. But instead, just embracing how badass you naturally are. No need to exaggerate that. And sitting in that seat of power and that pocket is really, really potent for this transit. Okay. Also, on this day, later in the day, Mars moves out of Leo and into Virgo, where it will be until September 14th. Um, Mars is not necessarily really excited to be in Virgo because Mars is like, I don't care, just go. And Virgo is like, but there's 857 parts that have to be organized and alphabetized first and dusted and cleaned and put perfectly back on the shelf. What are you talking about? Just go. But again, when we can be present with ourselves with that, Mars lends a get it done vibe to the workhorse of the chart, which is Virgo. Can we spiral out on the details? Yes, we can. Absolutely. But where this is really helpful is that we may also finally have the drive to really get in and handle some of the tasks that we have been avoiding because they have a whole bunch of really fussy parts. So cleaning up, organizing, all of that is really, really potent. Hey, wait a minute. Organizing? Isn't there a general strike being planned on October 15th? Why, yes, Megan, there is. It's a national general strike. Huh, amazing. So this Mars in Virgo could be really fantastic for putting some drive into organizing. Lots of fussy parts, like millions of people all across the country? I don't know, maybe. Also on this day, we have Thor's Day. This is a modern pagan holiday celebrating Thor. Thor's Day is Thursday, named after Thor. Yeah, just like Wednesday's named after Woden. Thor is a hammer-wielding god associated with lightning, thunder, storms, sacred groves and trees, strength, the protection of mankind, and also hallowing and fertility. All stuff we've already talked about in just this week. Also on this day, we have the Feast of St. Martha. This is the festival of near-death experiences. St. Martha is a form of, kind of a form of Mary, but really she is the sister of Lazarus who was brought back from the dead by Jesus, if you're not familiar with that story. She is considered a saint and protects her cities from all evil, etc., etc. Her festival obviously is marked by death and resurrection symbols. And folks will thank the saint for having saved them from death and surviving the last 12 months that have passed and all of that good stuff. All right, let's move on to the last day of our lunar week, finally. This is a long one, July 30th. Okay, on July 30th, we start off with a waning half moon entering Taurus. Now, the official waning half moon is the next day, July 31st, more or less in alignment with Lughnasadh. And obviously, in the next podcast, we're going to talk all about that stuff. But for our metaphor that we've been working with the moon, in the waning half moon, the vine begins to retract. So we had our seed at the new moon. It grew and grew and grew until it finally produced a fruit at the full moon. In the disseminating moon, that fruit ripens and we harvest it. And now here at the waning half moon, the vine that produced that fruit is starting to wither and retract and pull back into itself. And so just like at the waxing half, the moon is square to the sun in this phase. And at the waxing half, it's an opening square. So it's like, okay, what's the crisis? How do I get out of stasis into the growth process that this lunar cycle is asking of me? You know, what's all of that about? Now we're kind of on the opposite side of that conversation. We've been in this process, and now the square to the sun is starting to say, okay, well, we've done what we can do. It's time to get ready to shut this down and figure out what the next seed is going to be and what the next lunar process is going to be. So there's a little bit of like, but I just got the fruit. I just got the harvest, and I've already got a man. So it can be a little of that, right? So what we want to be working with here is making practical changes in your physical world. Whether that is reducing and retracting type changes, or if it's just like hanging that picture that you've been talking about putting up on the wall for the last 6 months, this is that it's time to do that kind of stuff. Fix stuff in your house, organize things, straighten things up, but really about fixing and, practical changes, physical world changes. If everything somehow weirdly is totally in order in your house, okay, first off, I'm spooked out by you. But secondly, offer your help to a friend. Do they have a project in their house that they have been dragging their feet about getting around to? Now might be the time, right? Again, in the background, we've got Mars that's just entered Virgo. So Mars is like, let me get into the details. Let's do this. And if everybody that you know has all of their shit together, that's okay, sure. But, add your efforts to a group like Habitat for Humanity. Again, when we are dealing with this waning half moon in Taurus, we want to be doing productive and practical physical world improvements. That's really what's up. Okay. For our lunar body, we are reducing, relieving, resting, soothing, and relaxing the hearing organs and the speech organs. So our ears, our mouth, our teeth, our throat, and also our neck, and our neck going into our shoulders. That's all areas of the body ruled by Taurus. And we want to just let everybody kind of relax and be soothed and rest, whatever that means for you. With our plant body work, we are planting, transplanting, or grafting for below ground action, as I've said before. All right. Last but not least, let's look at the couple of things that we have going on in July 30th. Okay, first, let me mention, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Praecep, and the heliacal rising of the two fixed stars that are Acellus. It's Acellus Borealis and Acellus Australis. So that's Acellus North and Acellus South. The Praecepi? Sorry, whoever you are, fixed star, I'm saying your name wrong. This is another name for the beehive or the manger star in the crab. And we see that constellation in the Letha class. So you can go back to the slides for the class or the book and you'll see the constellation in there. But it's basically the square that's in the very center of the crab of Cancer. So the beehive, the manger, the center of the crab shell. And then the two stars named Acellus are also in the shell of the crab, but at previous times, they have been depicted as two donkeys. And so we can think back to the biblical story of the donkeys outside of the manger, all of that, super cute. But we might also want to think back to last week for our podcast where we talked about the Egyptian god Set, and that he at one point was depicted with a donkey's head. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Also on this day, we have two very interesting holidays that line up. In the modern era, we have the International Friendship Day. The International Day of Friendship was proclaimed in 2011 by the UN General Assembly with the idea that friendship between peoples, countries, cultures, and individuals can inspire peace efforts and build bridges between communities. Doesn't that sound exactly like the Greek festival that we started the week off with, the Synoika? Like, hello? Well, if that's not enough for you, also on this day, we have the Dies Natalis of the Temple of Concordia from our Roman friends. In ancient Roman religion, Concordia is the goddess who embodies agreement in marriage and society at large. Her Greek equivalent is usually regarded as harmonia, with musical harmony a metaphor for an ideal of social concord in the political discourse of the Republican era. She was thus often associated with the goddess Pax, who represents peace, in representing a stable society. As such, she sits more closely related to the Greek concept of harmonia, like-mindedness, which was also represented by a goddess. So we have 3 fucking holidays this week where the state basically is like, y'all are gonna fucking get along, okay? And then in the background, we have all of this astrology and we have all of these other holy days and festivals that are like, I need to be the leader. Where is my responsibility? Where is my role? Do those two things seem disparate? They kind of do on the surface, right? But here, let me put it like this. If I am a leader and I am not feeling friendly towards the people that I'm leading, well, right? Like how funky is my leadership going to be? How many weird funky things am I going to do as a leader? Because I'm not thinking of these people as my friends. I'm not thinking of these people as people I'm supposed to be friendly with and taking into account. And conversely, as a member of the populace, right? I want to be doing everything in my power to get along with the people around me because it makes life easier. But also because it's the right thing to do. This is how society has actually managed to move itself forward through time, not because of one individual leader every here and there doing something fancy. They help get fancy things done, but it's normal ass people who pull in the crops. It's normal ass people who turn those crops into bread. It's normal ass people who take those loaves of bread and sell them in the market. And it's normal ass people who buy the bread and eat it and share it with their normal ass friends and their normal ass family. Okay, TLDR, eat the rich, right? Like, that's just what we're getting to here. I said a bunch of other stuff and I was like, nah, I just want to say that. All right. We have finally come to the end of this week's podcast. We made it. We're really here. Let's do the roundup. Okay. Our lunar phases this week are from Aquarius through Taurus. We have a full moon in Aquarius. We have our disseminating moons in Pisces and in Aries, and then that moves into the waning half moon in Taurus. In astrology, we have on July 24th, Mercury trine Neptune, July 25th, Mercury oppose Pluto, July 27th, Mercury enters Leo, July 28th, Jupiter in retrograde, back into Aquarius, and on July 29th, we have Venus square the North Node, Mars opposing Jupiter retrograde, and Mars entering Virgo. Next week, we have Lughnasadh, solar Lughnasadh, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm sure you're shocked to know that there'll be millions of things for me to talk about. Well, cool. Okay. Good luck out there, kids. It's a little spicy, but we've got this. It's fine. It's just that Pluto opposition during the middle of the week that's like, I want to make sure everybody's fussy. So don't be fussy. Don't fall for it. You know what's up. Allow this week to be a week where you do your internal work and you allow these uncomfortable conversations to come up for you around where are you contributing to the society around you? What are your motivations behind that? What's your connection between your friends and your family? Why does one person qualify as friend and one person qualify as family? And what does that mean about how you treat them? Where can you put your work out into the world in places where it's going to be really useful for the largest amount of people? How can we do that work without so much ego attachment, but just knowing this needs to get done and I'm the motherfucker who can do it? And ultimately moving into, more and more and more practical real world examples of this is the work that I do. Here's me doing it. This is where I can contribute. I'm contributing. I feel good about my contributions, but that doesn't make me better than anybody else. And the fact that somebody needed my contribution does not make them worse or less than anybody else. We are all in this together. So, I'm excited to see what other badass motherfuckers are going to step up onto the stage and lead from the heart and also be led from the heart, right? I don't need to be in charge all the time. I'm excited for somebody else to be in charge some of the time. Partly because you're going to come up with stuff I would never come up with. And that's not my shorting, and that's not you better than me. That's just the spice of life, The spice of life. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Clearly, I need to get off of the podcast to go outside and run around, which I'm going to do. I love you. Blessed be. And happy almost Lughnasadh. I'll see you in class, witch.